read somewhere that the welcoming prayer was very helpful to Mary Mrozowski when she was dying. I read that, I'm sure, maybe in one of those contemplative bulletins.
Well, the story, I'll tell you her story, a little bit of it. She went to Italy with her son-in-law was a psychiatrist, and her daughter, there was a psychiatric conference. And so she was over in Assisi. And if you knew Mary, that would just be like Mecca. And so she was out wandering the streets by herself, and Mary was a diabetic, had type 2 diabetes, and had done a lot, and was off insulin at the time. Maybe she was back on, but had really worked with her physicality a lot. But a car went by one of the streets. Long story short, she fell and broke her arm. And she was in Italy, and she was out. So they took her to the hospital, and she somehow communicated with them, not speaking the language, and they set her arm. And by the time she got back to the conference, but without any pain relief. She didn't take an aspirin or anything. And she said, I'm not telling you not to take an aspirin if you need to, but what about turning to God? So they managed to set the arm, and she went back to the conference and was telling the doctors, blah, blah, blah. So all of that happened. Well, later on, she got back to Chrysalis, and she was going out to Denver soon after, like right after, to give this workshop and a forgiveness prayer. And she did this prayer, and later on, she was meeting with Sister Bernadette Teasdale in the chair, and she just went. You can hear her. I had the tape of her last welcoming presentation that night, and she said, I have a pain in my chest, or something that she was welcoming and let go, and next day she dropped. So anyway, so Thomas always said she got far too good at welcoming. But she shares in that talk that her experience was absolutely mystical. That, she'd been doing welcoming for a couple decades, so she wouldn't trade it for anything. But that she was able to manage the crisis, was able to communicate with the physicians, was able to get herself understood or what needed to, and to be taken care of in situations that would have caused her in the past a lot of anxiety, fear, and all of that. She said it was positively mystical. And it was just the entrance into freedom. And Thomas said at her funeral, he said, I should have known she was going. She just got far too happy to be in the human body. And he said, he did. He lamented. He said, it should have rung a bell. Mary was 2 years younger than Thomas. So he said, I just always thought she would outlive me. But she was so filled with life. And that's what happens. Wouldn't it be a nice thought that we just get so full of life that we just need to shed the body like the little butterfly, the pupa, instead of you get old and you shrivel up and you die, do you know? And because Mary used to, I'll tell you, she was a real stickler on our words. That a lot of us talk about you get old, sick, and die. She said, maybe you'll get old if you live long, you will if you don't die sooner, and you're going to die. She goes, why do you keep inserting sickness in there? And honest to God, she just went and dropped. So it was a very big piece of her story in the welcoming piece of it. And what I'm reminded of with back there is one of my great, I just forgot. Who said it? I had a great many difficulties in my life, and most of them have never happened. Wait. Mark Twain, thank you. But I love that. Isn't it the truth that is the gift of aging, that we waste all this energy, so when the real occasion, when we need the energy, it's not there. That's why I tie welcoming so much to your energetic flow. Because when we stop projecting or ruminating on the past, the energy comes into the present. And we have enough till we don't need it anymore. And then you let it go. So it's that whole energetic thrust that's just really, when life becomes the incredible journey of not knowing. Like that's what I said to my mother, because it's a fascinating thought to me. My mother and I are 40 years apart. And she said to me when she was 80 and I was 40, she said, "How did I live 40 years with you not telling me what to do?" Because literally I kind of ran the house, And I looked at her, but this is honest to God truth. I looked at her and I said, "I don't know, that's such an amazing thing to me." It really, because it was. Do you know what I mean? I don't know, anybody else relate to Cinderella? Are there any other Cinderellas in the room? Because if you did everything, do you know? It used to amaze me that she did have a house and kids and a husband and all of that. And my grandmother did a lot. But I was like, yeah, who did that? So that made me take it back a few steps more. And I thought, at what age are we, or was I, when I stopped being the learning, like show me more, and started to say, no, do it this way. Do you know that? It was young. It was very young in my thing, because I know how to set a table. I learned all those little things, because then I had to do them, or I did them, or wanted to. So, and then at some point it took over and it infiltrated all of my life. Like I would love to be one of those students that was in class that was there to learn. You know that? When you just didn't. No, I needed to figure out how you got the grade. And then I learned it was strategic. It was strategic. So I love those who can have that space, which is where I want to be. It's part of the intention. And that's what these prayer practices do for me, is to say, I don't know. Well, what do you know about it? Or teach me, or show me. Or, wow, God, isn't that neat? There's so much to learn in an open sense, but that many of us, at least I, close down real early. So then it's trying to push that agenda through the whole way, and it gets really heavy really fast. And if not, as the Pennsylvania Dutch say, you get too soon old and too late smart. So any other questions or comments on your practice?
Would you mind going over just briefly, no thought is worth thinking about? Something is not gelling in my thinking about that thought.
Okay. Thank you, that's a good one. There were two guys, Jim and Pete. And Pete bought a new lawnmower. It's a really nice lawnmower, too. Had all the bells and whistles. So Pete said to, was it John? Sorry. Jim. Said to Jim, you can borrow the lawnmower whenever you want to. It's beautiful. Wait till you see it, and it's self-propelled. And Jim said, okay. Anyway, he thought, I'll never touch it. So Jim's out mowing his lawn, and doesn't he hit a rock and blow out the blade? And the wife's having a party that night, so the lawn has to be cut. And he said, well, gee, Pete said I could borrow his lawnmower whenever I want to. So I'm just going to go over and borrow his lawnmower. I'll have the lawn done in no time at all. So Pete's walking over there, or Jim's walking over to Pete's, and he said, I bet Pete spent a lot of money on that machine. That's a John Deere or a Toro or whatever, it's super powered. I bet he spent $5,000 on it. It's probably worth almost as much as a car. And if I hit another rock with his machine, he would probably make me pay for it. And I can't afford to buy a new lawnmower of $5,000. Where does he think I'm going to get that kind of money? So he rings on the doorbell, and Pete opens the door, and Jim says, you know what you can do with your lawnmower? That's where no thought is worth thinking about comes into it. Because the two events happened, but the story we tell ourselves, do you ever have that? Like somebody, you're there and you're telling this story. They have no idea what you're talking about because you've been thinking this whole thing. And you come back here and you think we're on the same page and they look at you like what are you talking about? Because the thoughts get in there. Now, in Centering Prayer, we talk about commentaries, which are not just a single thought, but those are the stories and the linked thoughts that we'll hear a lot of commentaries during the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl is filled with commentators. So they don't just tell you about who's catching the ball or throwing the ball. They tell you all the statistics that ever were about them throwing a ball or catching a ball and who everybody else has done and what it'll be. They go on and on. Well, some of us have our built-in commentators that get us into a lot of trouble. So when the story is up, and really the obsessive story, there are a few that we have usually that are our kind of root story. Oh, there it happened again. It just proved what I've always said, that it's going to be like that. You know that one? You just, as soon as you hit it, it's like, I know this place, I've lived this place, I've smelled this place, I know this place stinks, and I'm always going to be here forever. I can't get to my body in those places because I'm so wrapped up in thought that I use that little phrase, no thought is worth thinking about, because I'm interjecting a thought to allow some spacing between the repetitive. In a really obsessive mode, this is kind of what's happening. So if you think of just gears, you have to do something in there to alter it and to slow it down or break it. So we don't want to break it. I mean, I wish I could, but that's not how my process works. My process goes with it. So no thought is worth thinking about begins slowly, but that's why I sing it, I say it out loud, I talk to myself because I use all my senses to kind of start to come in. It allows, okay. Because when you're really upset, you know that person you could call and you could talk like this and they'd know exactly what you were talking about? Or when you're like that, what do you try to do? It's okay. Slow down. That's what no thought is worth thinking about. It's just kind of doing this. But it's doing it through that level of thought so that eventually it can dissipate and you can get to what might be going on, which usually has nothing to do with what you were thinking about. Okay?